weeks for a couple of days. No, come back in a couple of days for a couple of weeks. So I was back at university in Sheffield, and my belief in what I was doing there was collapsing. But I was in my final year of my degree, and I felt the pressure to get my head down, and I was so torn. On the one side, there was these huge expectations and duty to fulfill my education, and on the other hand, I was the enticing deep magic of Twyford Down, where I wanted to be. So I just made the most of it and did a lot of toing and froing between Sheffield and Winchester. I spent several weeks on the Down, all in all, taking part in actions, living daily life, watching the moon rise and set, playing, singing, exploring the landscape. It was a powerful connection, an enchantment. It was an emergence of belonging. From the Dongas, you could see across the steeply plunging, spectacular valley, Plague Pits Valley it was called, up to the huge, mother-like mound of St. Catherine's Hill, with her Iron Age ramparts and a magnificent crown of beech trees on the top. We used to walk over there often. And in the copse of beech trees, there was a wide, raised, round mound. It was a mystery, but we must spent many hours lying there, listening and feeling. And just outside the copse, there was a Victorian mizmaze carved into the turf. It took ages to get around it and back out again. And sometimes we would create our own mazes and spirals with the chalk and flint stone of the Down. Playfully, intuitively maybe. The Dongas, the Twyford Down was the place where some of the earliest ancestors of the British people lived for hundreds of years. And the Dongas themselves were formed by hundreds of generations of people and their animals walking down the hillsides. And that flint just had a deeply ancient energy to it. I could feel the ancestors' presence, even though I didn't believe in that sort of thing at the time. Hey young goer, hey young goer, hey hey hey, hey young goer, hey young goer, hey young goer, hey hey hey, hey young goer, hey hey young goer, hey hey young goer, hey young goer, hey young goer, young goer, hey young goer, hey young goer, young goer, hey young goer. We played and danced and sang spontaneously in these magic places, the mounds, the spirals, the mazes. And it felt like we were charging ourselves up on earth energy. Meanwhile, back on the Dongas, under the moonlight, we dug our own ditch and ridge and stuck hazel poles in its back, adding little triangular cloths in different colours to form our own brightly coloured dragon. And Sam wove a beautiful head out of thin hazel poles, and it was placed at the front of our dragon ridge, looking out over the Down. This ridge formed the boundary between the Dongas camp and the Down itself. In native cultures from around the world, the dragon is the symbol of the spirit and power of the earth. And by creating a sculpture of her, we called on her as our power source, as our ally and protection in all the work and play that we were doing. And just outside the dragon, on the down where you could see for miles, we kept a lookout every day. The lookout had seen 3 diggers from the far end of the down driving up towards our camp. Everyone who was there that day poured out of the gate and stood ready to face them. We just so happened to have been face painting ourselves that day, and most of us were covered in brightly coloured, exquisite paints that were also warrior-like. It felt like we must have been preparing for that moment. And the women stood together, holding hands, watching the diggers drive towards us. And a couple of 100 yards away, they just stopped. We are the old people, we are the new people, we are the same people, stronger than before. We are the old people, we are the new people, we are the same people, stronger than before. You can't kill the spirit, can't kill the spirit, you can't kill the spirit of the dragon. We could see into the eyes of the digger drivers. They looked at us and just clearly didn't know what to do. They turned around and drove away that day. But that was the early days. And sad to say, within a few months, that land was destroyed. The road companies one night sent in their hired security men with shites and nylon armour and their yellow jackets. They came into our camp and beat everyone up. The next day, they took advantage of our weakened state and sent in the diggers to scrape up the turf of our beloved Dongas. And although that land was destroyed, although there's still some of it is there if you want to go and see it, it felt like the spirit of that land went into our tribe and we became known as the Dongas tribe. We stayed together, moving around at first Hampshire. Well, I had to go back to Sheffield, but I joined them as soon as I finished university. And then we became involved in a whole wave of other road protest camps and actions taking place across Britain. There was the M11, Salisbury Hill, Fairmile, Newbury. And it was like this government roads programme where they wanted to build 150 new roads across Britain, triggered this incredible uprising and emerging of earth-loving cultures and people waking up to come together in new ways. And so it was an inspiring time, and it felt like our tribe was not just this little group of people, but this massive network of activists and people starting to live a different way of life. It was a powerful time, and it sent out huge ripples. And I believe that this is some of the history that feeds into the world of activism that we know today, the Reclaim the Streets, the Occupy, all these other movements that are part of people waking up and choosing to live differently, choosing to come together in love and in joy. And so I offer you this story as a morsel of history and as a story of inspiration, and so you can feel how that may be a strand in what you're doing in your lives. And I honour you for all that you do. And I wish to just transmit a little bit of that magic that was there and pass it forward.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, can I have all four of you here, please? I'm holding on to this for timekeeping. They've been very good on keeping the time. As you can imagine, to fit all these 4 stories into an evening was quite a thing. So good for you to be boundaried. And
You taught us well about it.
I know. And yet so full at the same time. So. We've got about 15 minutes if you wanna ask any questions. Maybe we could have the door open for some air, actually. Okay. Any questions or comments or reflections? I just want to say that, what's really amazing about it is that all of them have, incredibly busy lives. Nobody here is a trained performer. And we basically, we didn't meet like every week or anything like that. We had like 3 spells of meeting 5 times every 2 weeks. So and we mainly played. Basically, when we met, we just had fun. Didn't we? And then sort of at the end, at the end I kind of went like, oh yeah, you can do it, let's do these stories. So this is just, it's a massive, I feel like, this is a massive achievement of creativity from the time, in a busy, really busy life. So just to put it in context. Okay. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Yes, that was question and answer. Or statement, exclamation.